Not too long back, I was watching Joe Rogan talk with Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, on Joe Rogan's podcast. At some point, they talk about the testosterone decline in men. And Joe goes on about how he had spoken with a doctor, Shanna Swan, who apparently researched the testosterone decline in men for a long time. And her research correlated it with plastics in food. And so there's these microplastics that are in various products and they get into our food. And so this was her thesis that there must be a connection here. I was completely in disagreement. So I decided, okay, let me look into what she's saying and I want to understand it better. Because I have a lot of respect for Joe Rogan. And so if he's saying it, I want to understand it. A lot of her conclusions come from simply correlation. So she looks at the testosterone decline in men and she looks at the rise of microplastics. And so she says that this curve of the decline in testosterone in men and the rise of microplastics, like they're perfectly correlated and therefore there must be some cause and effect. And one thing that she cites, so there was this Boston study of men where they took data of 1,700 Boston-based men between the years of 87 to 89, 1995 to 1997, and 2002 to 2004. And what they saw is that as time went on, you would expect some testosterone decline in men, but basically what they saw in the later populations was that it was much faster than what they had seen previously. Right. So if you took a guy and, normally his testosterone would decline like this over time as he ages, basically what they observed in these men is that the slope down was much, much steeper. Now, why is this important? So testosterone has been linked to a lot of important things in the human body. So if you lose testosterone, that they generally link that with a loss of muscle mass, like that you have more fatigue, you have a much higher risk of depression, you typically lose your hair more, your bones are more brittle. So there's a huge list of things that correlate with a loss of testosterone, and I completely agree with that, right? And I would say I've even experienced it. Like as my testosterone has gotten worse, lots of things got worse. As I've improved, my testosterone improved and lots of things got better. So I completely get that. They've also understood that testosterone declines with age. The traditional notion is that beginning around the age of 40, men's testosterone begins to decline about 1% to 2% each year. Therefore, the common thinking is that testosterone declines with age. This is where I start to disagree, because what I've noticed in myself is that my testosterone is only increasing the last 3 or 4 years. Right? I'm getting older, my testosterone is improving. Why? Because I'm fixing these biomechanics. So my thesis is that testosterone has absolutely nothing to do with a number of how old you are. And it has everything to do with these biomechanics I talk about. And the reason that they've linked it to aging is very simple, because these biomechanics typically get worse with age, unless you know how they work and unless you know how to reverse it. And the reason for that, as I've explained before, is that typically with aging, you're grinding your teeth down, right? Or you're basically losing dental height, and that triggers this whole biomechanical chain reaction that results in the collapse of the body and the decline in testosterone. So I totally get that. And I totally disagree with this Dr. Shanna Swan, who was on Joe Rogan's podcast talking about how she thought it was microplastics, because the main thesis of her argument is that it's this correlation. We have more plastics, more of it's getting into our food. And because that curve goes up just as testosterone declines, she concludes that there must be a relationship. But I'm sorry, there is an absolute ton of stuff that has that same curve, right? I'll give you examples. So neurological disease. I am sure that neurological disease has this ramp up, and the curve probably looks a lot like the microplastics one. Does that mean it's related to microplastics? No. But it is related to the decline in testosterone, because in my view, they're all just different faces to the same problem. Another one would be the rise of obesity, all these things over the last 40, 50 years have the same curve. Obesity, boom. Neurological disease, boom. Mental health disorder, boom. All these things, I guarantee, like if you put all this data together and form those curves, they'll look the same slope, because these are just different elements of the same human, body problem. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that she makes this conclusion based on this correlation. And I see that it's very clear based on my experience and based on what I'm seeing in the folks that I'm tracking, that the testosterone decline in men is very much related to this biomechanical problem that we are fixing. And by fixing it, we are improving testosterone, right? Sometimes I cannot control my testosterone during the day. Like I have these surges, especially after I do some of the stretches that I do, and it just feels like I'm wired on testosterone. Do I measure it? No. But like, do I feel the testosterone? Yes. Like when you have these surges, it's actually pretty obvious. And so I am quite confident that when I finally finish, I'm going to have very healthy levels of testosterone, and I probably already do. And it will be much higher than I had years ago, despite the fact that I have not tried to decrease my consumption of microplastics in any way. I have not changed my diet. I've not tried to do exercise. I have only gotten older, and yet my testosterone will have ramped up massively. Why? Because testosterone is a function of these biomechanics.